I have a question. Why are you Christian? Like, what makes you choose Christianity?
I can tell you my personal testimony, but I think you might be asking what is the rational basis that I'm still a Christian. Like, I was a Christian when I was a kid because of, I believe, an experience I had with Christ. But why am I a Christian today? I would argue because it's the only rational choice among all the philosophies in the world, all the religions in the world. All other philosophies and religions fall to contradictions, where Christianity is the only one that can account for the laws of contradiction and the laws of logic and math, because the universal mind of God, who doesn't change. But, when you get into it, so it narrows it down to basically your monotheistic religions. You have to say Judaism or Islam or Christianity. But I think the way Christianity is superior, especially like if you say Judaism, I would argue Christianity is a fulfillment of Judaism. The Old Testament is a fulfillment in the New Testament. But that with Islam, the God of Islam suffers from the criticism of what's called voluntarism. Like if God in Islam, if Allah is the way He is, then He could tell you one thing one minute and then tell you something else the next minute, or He could make it to where there's, and a lot of them don't believe in causation, like cause and effect in nature. They don't believe in laws of physics, and because they believe that Allah is recreating everything from moment to moment, so He creates and then He recreates from moment to moment, and so there's no causation. Whereas Christianity can account for causation because of God is the designer of physics and science is possible because God made our minds to be able to exercise themselves in the material world. There's an objective world. It's subject to the objective standards and laws that God has created and designed them into. So ultimately, you can't account for rationality, you can't account for morality, and you can't account for science if you're not a Christian, I would argue. So, but as far as me personally, I had an experience with Jesus Christ when I was a child.
Child?
Yeah, and I've, spent the last several decades of my life examining other claims, atheism, agnosticism. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, you see, hey guys. So, but anyway, so I've spent the last 50 years or 40 years. I'm not that old. I know I look old, but of my life, examining the claims of Christianity and comparing them with the claims of other religions and other philosophies, and I haven't found where any other religious system, any other philosophical system is cogent or coherent, or it's not self-contradictory. Like Christianity is the only one that is, it's rationally consistent with itself, and it explains what we experience. Like a lot of people say, well, math, just for example, math is just invented by humans. Well, if that's true, then we could make math different. I could make 2 + 2 = 5 for me. But, that doesn't work. Go build a building like that. Go try to construct a bridge with math that you created, and it's not gonna work, But so math is an example of unchangeable, immutable, conceptual laws. Like math is not something you found on the ground. It's something that you apprehend with your mind. You think about it, and you can experience it. But yet there are mathematical equations that predate even by atheists. They say, well, there's a mathematical equation for the Big Bang, they would say. Well, how do you have a mathematical equation to explain the Big Bang? And they discover it, these guys would say, that these mathematical, they call them objects or mathematical entities, have stable properties that weren't created by men. They were discovered by men. It's like, well, how do you have that before there were minds of men? There was a universal mind of God. That's how you have it. And He made us in His image, because the problem's a lot worse than people realize. It's not just that these laws exist, is that we can use them, like you think. You come here to think, right? And you're assuming there are laws of logic that are being exercised in your class, in the books you read, and by your teachers. You're evaluating their claims and trying to see, are they rational? Why are you doing that? Why are you saying, if what their claims are and what these books teach are not consistent with the laws of logic, then they're not right. But why do you think that everything has to be rational? Unless everything was created by God and is upheld by His power. I didn't even hear what he said, but is upheld by His power and consistent with His mind because it's His creation. You know, but if you have, what happens if you don't have God? You fall immediately into subjectivism, where you say, well, how do you know laws of logic apply to everything? How do you know the laws of physics won't change in the next minute and a half? You know, you don't have that guarantee. And philosophers have already argued these things for centuries. So this is not nothing new.